The overwhelming majority of the United Nations General Assembly voted Wednesday against the blockade imposed by the United States on Cuba. In Sudan, more than 130 women committed suicide in a single day for fear of being sexually abused by warring military groups in the nation's civil war. In Cuba, the Peace with Nature coalition was officially launched during COP16 to address the global environmental crisis. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. 187 countries demanded the United States to end the blockade policy against Cuba that it has maintained for more than 6 decades. Our special envoy to the United Nations, Aiza Garcia, has the details.
For the 32nd consecutive time, the international community demanded today that the United States put an end to the economic, financial, and commercial blockade imposed on Cuba in 1962.
The result of the vote is as follows. With 187 votes in favor, the draft resolution is approved.
Shortly before the vote, from the highest tribune of the United Nations, the Cuban foreign minister warned about the permanent reinforcement of the siege policy against the island and its most recent impact.
The primary cause of the failure of the national electricity system was the lack of fuel that affected generation and caused instability associated with the precarious state of our plants, both direct consequences of the extreme measures of economic warfare applied by the United States government since 2019, specifically designed to prevent supplies of fuel and of parts and pieces for technical maintenance to our plants and electrical installations, as well as to hinder investment and access to financing.
Rodriguez denounced the extraterritorial nature of unilateral coercive measures.
In 1 year alone, the previous United States government sanctioned 53 vessels and 27 companies associated with shipments to Cuba.
He emphasized that for more than 6 decades, Cuba has been the victim of the most unjust, severe, and prolonged system of sanctions ever applied against any country.
The blockade against Cuba is an economic, financial, and commercial war and qualifies as a crime of genocide.
The Cuban diplomat stated that more than 80% of the current population has only known a blockaded Cuba.
No country, even those with economies much more robust than Cuba's, could face such a brutal, asymmetric, and extended aggression over time, without a considerable cost to the standard of living of its population.
He further stated that the blockade is an act of economic warfare in times of peace.
It would be impossible to ignore that the extreme hardening of the blockade is the main reason that has led a significant number of young Cubans to bet on transitory or permanent ways of personal fulfillment outside the island, which has a lacerating impact on families and the homeland.
In his speech to the international community, the Minister of Foreign Affairs exemplified how sanctions affect any Cuban family.
With $12 million, Cuba could acquire the insulin necessary for all our diabetics. In a single day, the blockade causes losses of more than that amount.
More than 50 countries took the opportunity to speak on the podium to call for an immediate end to the siege, which they described as anachronistic, immoral, and inhumane.
From the harshness of this collective punishment and the serious consequences of its free development, the Cuban people resist facing privations that no nation deserves to endure.
Colombia knows firsthand that far from supporting terrorism, Cuba has worked tirelessly in the search for peace and overcoming the armed conflict in my country.
Solidarity groups came to celebrate Cuba's victory at the United Nations. It was the United States and Israel who opposed the resolution condemning the U.S. blockade against the island of Cuba, while Moldova abstained.
teleSUR, Naciones Unidas, Nueva York.
On Thursday, the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, was the target of over 30 attacks, most of them coming from the Israeli occupying forces. UNIFIL's spokesperson, Andrea Tinelli, stated so, adding that at least 7 of the hostile actions perpetrated by Israel were deliberate. The Israeli aggressions have not only targeted cameras, equipment or watchtowers of the UNIFIL, but also some of their members have been wounded. The UNIFIL has been deployed there since Israel invaded the country in 1978, and nowadays UNIFIL members are concerned over both the Israeli actions and those of the Hezbollah resistance movement, as their lives are at stake. We are going to take a short break now, but first we invite you to follow our special segment dedicated to the upcoming U.S. elections only on teleSUR, today at 7:30 Quito time, 8:30 Caracas, New York and Havana time. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In Sudan, more than 130 women committed suicide in a single day for fear of being sexually abused by warring military groups in the nation's civil war. The news came to light recently after a publication on social networks and has given way to a wave of denunciations comparable to the increase in sexual crimes. Hala Al-Karib, Regional Director of the Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa, confirmed that the reports about the denunciation are absolutely true. Karib confirms that since the first day of the war, women have been subjected to brutal abuses, and notes that in this conflict, the main victims of the paramilitary forces are girls and women between 17 and 35 years of age. In Kenya, many communities live in deplorable material conditions and pay dearly for access to basic services. Voices from the slums of Nairobi proposes alternatives to the ongoing crisis.
They have proposals and must be consulted if proactive. People-led solutions are to be found. That is the message of the Social Justice Center in Makuru Kwanjinga, a slum east of Nairobi where 300 to 350,000 people live. In this container is kept the conscience of the communities organizing work in the search for justice in the face of problems such as sex for water, or demolitions, fires and murders.
The natives, the people who live in these informal settlements, they are just like reserved labor to the industries and also to the middle class and also the rich people who lives around, so that they can go to that area to offer labor to them and also to the industry. So it's quite terrible, even in terms of income. The money that they get when they work, it's not sustainable to them.
And the worst thing is unemployment and lack of work. They pay $10 a month for the rent of a room, eat irregularly, and have to buy water, electricity, and even pay for the use of public toilets. These are the sewage they had to use to put out the last fire.
We are arranging ourselves in a line, so this is where we are fetching water. Up where the fire was, that was the challenge that we had.
Ha sido el cuarto incendio en este
It was the fourth fire in this Rubin neighborhood so far this month. But the pipes were dry because of the restrictions they have been facing for months. Youth for Youth, applying what they know, put their lives on the line to cut the fire voluntarily and without proper materials. They have created a grassroots organization with 25 active members. Together, they raise pigs and chickens, and thus organize and research how to empower themselves to actively build a better life.
We use only the knowledge that we have. That's why it's called ghetto. Getting higher education to teach others. That's the only thing I can say. We have not been trained, we are only volunteers and risk takers too.
What the community is asking for is to build on what the community has already built to try to improve living conditions.
There's that key thing that unites us is solidarity, because I am because you are. When we come together, we can achieve a lot of things.
This process continues step by step. They are actively demanding recognition of the work the community is doing to ensure that they are involved in planning policies.
Desde Mukuru, Óscar Epelde para TeleSUR.
The first meeting of the Global Alliance for the Creation of a Palestinian State and the End of Israel's occupation of the territories was held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on Wednesday. This meeting, considered as a decisive step for the Palestinian state, is part of the agreements reached at the United Nations General Assembly in September. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas thanked King Salman bin Abdulaziz and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman for their leadership. The Palestinian leaders emphasized the need to implement the United Nations resolution on the Inter-American Court of Justice within a specific time frame, as well as the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2735 on a ceasefire and the delivery of humanitarian aid in Gaza. China rejected the trade restrictions imposed by the United States and the European Commission's decision to impose additional fees. According to the Ministry of Commerce, the measures target sectors such as chips, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. In a statement, Beijing denounced that most of the industries related to these fields are not connected to national security. However, all of them will be affected, which will disrupt normal economic and trade cooperation between the two countries' enterprises. Beijing also rejected the European Commission's decision to impose additional fees on electric vehicles manufactured in the Asian giant. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Colombia, the Peace with Nature coalition, which brings together more than 22 countries and 80,000 people to address a global environmental crisis, was officially launched during COP16. The Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Antonio Guterres, 6 heads of states and 5 foreign ministers, 114 ministers, and more than 80 organizations, among other attendees and participants, witnessed the birth of this coalition, which, in the words of the Minister of the Environment of Colombia, Susana Muhammad, is a political declaration of significance to make a change with nature. This initiative addresses the challenges of climate change and highlights the importance of uniting peace and nature.
Building peace means, above all, the transformation of territories historically affected by poverty, violence, and the incidence of illegalized economies. Many of these territories are in environmental ecosystems of great value for Colombia and the world.
In Venezuela, the president, Nicolás Maduro, called on the people to work to strengthen tourism with the nations of the world so that it becomes a new window for the country's economic growth. During the presentation of the third edition of the National Tourism Award 2024 at the Humboldt Hotel in Caracas, the president pointed out that it is necessary to promote the tourism sector so that people can get to know the cultural richness of Venezuela. In this sense, the Venezuelan head of state emphasized that the country is abundant in historical sites that can be made known through tourist plans.
There are a million Chinese tourists who would like to come here. As a goal for the next 2 years, we have to guarantee, write it down and ask for help from artificial intelligence if it's necessary.
Tenemos que garantizar, Alfred Nazaret, usted como vicepresidente de esa área, tenemos que garantizar,
Mrs. Minister, we have to guarantee that, as I told President Xi Jinping when we recently met there in Kazan, Russia, we have to guarantee for the Venezuelan tourism regime the direct flight Beijing-Caracas and 1 million Chinese tourists in the tourist sites and tourist services in Venezuela.
Los parajes turísticos.
In Mexico, citizens gear up for the Day of Dead festivities. The Day of the Dead is celebrated in Mexico from 28th of October to November 2nd. But citizens prepare well in advance. Farmers sow flowers and artisans make decorations. Mexicans flock to the capital's markets to buy flowers and food for their offering to their dead loved ones. While in the evening, crowds fill the Zócalo Plaza as it is lit up and decorated with a mega offering to the dead.
The market is really beautiful at this time because it is filled with flowers. A lot of people, a lot of tourists come. People really like it. They come to take pictures. Many tourists come because they find it interesting and they like the atmosphere here in the market.
It's a very special day because we welcome our dead into our homes so that they can come and eat the food we have left for them as an offering.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.